I'm Amanda Belisle. I'm here today with Gehrig Tucker, who is a facilitator for veterans and first responders for Ibogaine treatment, mainly in Mexico. Gehrig and I met in Mexico a few months back when I myself was doing Ibogaine. Gehrig had done it a couple months prior to me, and he was facilitating about 5 other veterans going through the journey of Ibogaine. The reason I really wanted a discussion with Gehrig today is I did not find a lot of literature about Ibogaine when I decided to do it on my own. I learned from Brian Hubbard, who is the CEO of Americans for Ibogaine, that it can restore your dopamine and serotonin levels. That was the basis of why I wanted to do it. I was in global sales for well over a decade. I had 3, and I have 3 really young children. And life, as most moms I think would agree, is super overwhelming. And so I said, what is that? What's that magic pill I can take that will help me get back to normal, help my brain reset, relieve me of my anxiety, right? Help me sleep at night, help me be present with my kids. To me, that answer was Ibogaine. I'm not someone who does psychedelics. I'm not someone who does drugs in general, but I like an easy button. So for me, it was, let's go do Ibogaine. What I found out doing Ibogaine was I wish I knew so much more going into it than I knew, because I think it would have been better for me, right? It was a great experience. I think for me, my best encounter with Ibogaine was meeting the people that did Ibogaine with me and understanding that Ibogaine is not just for veterans, right? It's for moms, it's for wives of veterans. It's for opiate addicts. I think when you and I were there together, the majority of people that were doing it, we had alcoholics, we had a meth addict, we had opioid addicts, we had Tim, who was a cell phone addict, right?
Yeah.
We had Brian, who had lost his son to CTE, right? Just all these wide variety of people that came to do Ibogaine for a different reason, and what they got out of it was all so significantly different. I think one thing I would have loved, and you and I have discussed this, is Ibogaine is something you can speak to, and it speaks back, and not for everyone, right? I didn't have that experience, but I wish I would have known you could have, right? And I know we'll get into your story and how you spoke to the medicine, but people actually go and speak to their loved ones that passed away, which is huge for me, right? My uncle lost his wife a couple years back. He's significantly depressed, right? If he could go and have a 48-hour journey that allows him to either speak to his wife or have memories, right, that helps his depression, why not, right? If our, the NFL athletes that have CTE could do it, and it could help them with their CTE. You have Brett, who's doing it for Parkinson's right now. The wide variety of stuff, and I guess, obviously, Ibogaine's not proven. Texas, as we all know, just passed a $50 million bill to help clinical studies for Ibogaine, which is amazing. Texas has the most veterans of anyone in the United States. So go Texas for leading that charge, and Brian Hubbard for kind of really leading that for all of America. But how do we make sure everyone knows and understands, number one, the wide variety of what Ibogaine can do, and for who, right? It's not just for people with PTSD or people with opioid addiction. It literally can help with the littlest of anxiety or trauma in the past. And so what I wanted to do today is get with Gehrig and go through kind of that raw and unfiltered version of Ibogaine from your lens, right? And we'll do it in 2 different ways. We'll cover your journey, right? Because, I think what attracted me most to you when I met you in Mexico was 2 things. Number one, Gehrig was the first person I met in Mexico. He sat down with me and I said, what was it like to you? And he said, I felt like I was being burned alive for 6 hours. So that is what I took with me on hoping, God, am I going to have pain like that for 6 hours? I could do that, right? 6 hours of horrible pain is worth no anxiety for me, is worth better sleep for me, is worth being present with my kids, is worth being the best wife. I can live through that. Of course, he did not mean physical pain, which I found out months later, but my journey had no pain to it, right? But also what I learned from you was you were suicidal for 3 years straight, right? And how all you thought about day in and day out, I remember you telling me in Mexico when we sat together that you couldn't have a conversation with the individual because the only thing on your mind is, how can I kill myself the next day? And that really brought up, number one, the fact that our veterans, right, go through so much for this country and how they're treated after, right? And I know you'll get into, you were kind of just kicked out of the military in a way and left. And I know even speaking with Noah, it was, I was in the military for 22 years, I got out. How do I get insurance? I have no clue how to do any of those things. And I think a lot of our veterans face that, which is why they have anxiety, PTSD, plus all the trauma from going to war on top of all of that. But really getting into that. And then I think going through that raw and unfiltered, what was it like pre-Ibogaine for you? What was your first trauma like as a child? What led you to all those suicidal thoughts? What led you to Ibogaine? What was your Ibogaine experience like in that high level? And then what is it like now, right? Now, and obviously you did it in February. I think I met you in April. Yes, yeah. April. But now you're leading other veterans through it. You're coaching them through it. You're an integration coach that spends months in advance with individuals going into Ibogaine and months, if not forever, with individuals post-Ibogaine, which I think is critical. And then what I thought would be great is not just understanding your point of view on Ibogaine, but understanding what a few of the veterans that were in Mexico with us, because they had some crazy trauma, right? And give their stories so everyone in the audience can really understand Ibogaine is not just for a certain use case. There's hundreds of use cases out there for it. And then I want to get into, I think probably you and I, favorite guy in Mexico, Weston. I think he was the life of the party. He was there the longest. His opioid addiction, which was crazy bad, I think he was there about 30 days in just 40 days, right? So let's go through his story because his is different from the veterans. And then we'll end on your dad, who actually just did Ibogaine a couple weeks ago and kind of what that was like. So we'll turn it over to Gehrig. But Gehrig, tell me, let's go through pre-Ibogaine. I know your first trauma was at 15 years old. Tell me your story, and then let's go through what led up to it.
So I had a pretty, in my mind, a pretty perfect childhood. And then everything started going downhill when I was about 15. It actually happened in one night. And it involved my dad and alcohol. And that was, that definitely reshaped basically the lens in which I saw the world. And that's kind of what trauma does to people, is it puts those filters on how they perceive their version of the world. Yeah. That was, I started to develop a lot of anger in that night, a lot of anger. And then that narrative, that lens just got thicker and thicker and thicker. And the more things I went through, mainly surrounding my dad, it created this pervasive sense of anger that I basically lived in. Yeah. And it was the more evidence that my brain saw to that I needed to be angry, that I needed to protect myself. That was a really big thing, was self-protection and protecting others. That narrative became pretty pervasive in my life and something that I really, really struggled with. So it left me in a place of, to the point where up until the point of Ibogaine recently, I was just a seriously pissed off person. And I felt wronged. I felt sad. I remember thinking many times in my life, especially in the last couple years, how is this my life? I truly felt like I was living someone else's life, someone else's nightmare. And along the way, there was narratives reinforced, such as I don't deserve love. Like
Yeah.
I might not be worthy of love. And all the evidence, I'm sure we'll get into that, but
Well, and I think it's important for the audience to see, like, this started at 15, and
Yeah.
I think so many people can relate to trauma as a
Yeah.
child and what it does to your entire life, right?
yeah, I would even say there was the foundation was being laid before that, with just the way that I was never really taught how to communicate love. I always knew I was loved,
Yeah.
but with the way that my dad was raised, like, that's not, he was raised in a perpetual state of fear, and like literally had to beat into him that you have to be constantly aware of the looming danger, like that. Like a prey sense was just beat into him, and that I think that, like, that hypervigilance, that like impending sense of doom,
Yeah.
every minute of the day, that got beat into my dad. And then there was an element that there was never, physical abuse,
Right.
but there was still kind of some of that leftover from what he experienced put onto us. And I think that he was truly believed that he was doing the best he could. And I believe that. I believe that he
Right.
was doing the best he could with kind of what he had.
And I think coming around to it, I know we'll talk about your dad and your relationship with
Yeah.
him, because you're hearing a little bit about it now and how it wasn't the best and you didn't necessarily feel loved. But we'll talk about where that is today after both of you have now done Ibogaine. But get into, I think it was when you were 22 is when the suicidal thoughts began. And I know there was a certain activity that took place that really put heavy trauma on your life. Talk us through that.
Yeah. So when I was, this was 2017, I was living with a couple of buddies, and one of my best friends had the idea to start a cancer foundation and then walk 1,000 miles for the fundraiser. So we started this organization, and we set off on our journey, and we were about, I want to say we were about 500 miles into the walk, and we had this lady hit us up, and she said, I heard what you guys are doing. We're from the same town. We're focusing on the Reno Tahoe area where we're from, and she contacted us and said, hey, I saw what you guys are doing. It's really, really cool. We have this kid. She was kind of like a caretaker for him, and she said, we would love if you guys would tell Victor's story. And so
And how old was Victor?
5, I believe, at the time. And they didn't ask for money. They didn't ask for anything other than they just wanted people to know what this kid was going through and support him. So we said, that's literally what we designed this thing for. We'd love to. And we got his story. He was 5 years old, had known nothing but cancer and needles and hospitals, and that was his life at 5 years old. And so we walked up to the top of a mountain up around Mount Shasta, and we shot this video, and we said, hey, Victor, we heard about your story, and we would love to help you out. And we want to, the kid was obsessed with trains. And so we said, hey, when we get back, we have the Virginia Tahoe Railroad, the V&T Railroad going through Carson City. And we said, when we get back, we're going to take you on a train ride. And we had like all these toys that we were going to buy for him and all this stuff and make it this really cool. We just wanted to give this kid a normal day as a 5-year-old. And when we got back, it took us 38 days to finish the 1,000 miles. And when we got back, before we got to meet him and have this day with him, he died. And we had done news interviews and all this stuff promoting like what we did. I mean, we were back a couple days. We hadn't seen our family for a little bit. That was the longest time he'd been away from his family at that point in time. And that crushed me. And if the narrative wasn't already in there in my head, it definitely increased. And that narrative was, you're a lying piece of shit. Why would anyone love you when you can't make good on a promise to a dying 5-year-old? And I hated myself after that. And then anything bad after that happened, it reinforced that narrative. And my brain would look for evidence of that. And so when stuff would happen with my dad or anything else, it reinforced that narrative. And along the way, we'd listen to a podcast every night before bed. And back on the 1,000 Miler, and we heard a podcast about a guy who was doing counter sex trafficking operations. And I heard about what he was doing, so I contacted them when I was back, and I said, hey, I'd really like to help out and get involved with the organization. And he said, well, it's great. You don't really bring anything to the table right now. So I said, what do you need? And he said, we need guys with special operations background. So I said, great. I went and got a 18 X-ray contract in the Army. That just allows you to go try out for Special Forces. And so I went into the military with the goal to get the training, education, knowledge, experience, all that stuff. Go do my time, and then go out and do counter sex trafficking. So went to Special Forces selection in 2021. Started the SFQ course, and then I ended up getting 2 traumatic brain injuries while I was in the Q course, and then medically discharged from the Army after that. I had 2 traumatic brain injuries in 4 days, 3 or 4 days. Wow. It was pretty bad. I remember closing. We racked out that night after the first one, and I remember sitting there, closing my eyes, and feeling like I was in a slot machine. Like, pull the lever, and then all the things start spinning with all the neon lights. That's how I remember closing my eyes and feeling super dizzy. It was not good. I remember waking up that night and hallucinating. Like I saw like a goblin, and so I told my buddy, and who's our medic. The medics are super dialed in, and I was like, hey Dylan, I think I'm like no shit messed up. And then the 18 Alpha, the leader of our team at that time, he actually saw me have a seizure that night, which I didn't remember. And he's actually my vice president for my nonprofit now. So Scott told Dylan, and then Dylan was like, okay, you have to go get checked out. So I didn't want to tell him, but I had to look myself in the eye and be like, you should not be hallucinating goblins. And then
something's wrong.
Yeah, and then I knew it wasn't good. So anyways, I go get checked out. I didn't have any brain bleeds. I go do an MRI, good to go. So I go back, and then freak accident happened a couple nights later, and then the doc pulled me from the course. So that
And were
was
you like formally discharged from the military?
yeah,
at that point?
no, not at that point.
Okay.
I just got officially discharged in November of 24. So it took 2.5 years to get
Fully discharged, but you were, I want to say, almost left at your doorstep, right? After that
yeah,
second
yeah,
brain injury.
that was yeah, basically 2 years of trying to I kind of had to figure everything out on my own. I was kind of on my own for like 2 years,
Right.
2.5 years. And the VA wouldn't cover me. I was in battles with them. And then trying to go through, navigate that whole process with like pretty bad brain injuries was not fun. Definitely felt isolated, constantly overwhelmed. I didn't feel like myself at all. I would say I'm a pretty high performing individual, and to then all of a sudden feel truly like handicapped or definitely not who I was. There was a complete dissociation of who I knew I was and then whose again life I was living. So you throw in like all the family stuff, all that fun stuff, and then a bunch of brain injuries on top of it. It was really bad. I attempted suicide in 2023, and then I basically spent all of that was March 2023, and then spent like basically the next 8 months doing all sorts of rehab. I went straight to a hospital. I did EMDR there. That's a type of treatment that is really, really helpful for some people. Didn't help me at all. I did the talk therapy. I went to a brain clinic in Boston. I did 2 months of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. I did 2 months of MERT treatment, which is basically they stick a magnet on your head and it taps and it's supposed to stimulate your brain.
Mm-hmm.
That
They do that for migraines too.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. That kind of helped, but nothing.
Was this after, because I know you had crazy sleep disturbances
Yeah.
and migraines, and was that happening at the same time?
Yeah, that was 2023. That's kind of when everything.
Paint that picture, because I know you were having nightmares and
Yeah.
insane sleep disorder.
I remember I'd be laying in bed, and my eyelids would start twitching, and then my eyes would start like horizontally shifting left and right, like they were trying to track something super fast, and it felt like I was inside of a washing machine. Just sitting there laying in bed, would get super nauseous. Yeah, the nightmares were pretty horrible and pretty frequent, multiple times a week. It got so bad that I started to fear going to sleep because I was scared of what I was going to see when I woke up, or when I was asleep rather. And I had never dealt with anxiety. I'd never dealt with, at least that I knew about. And yeah, this skin crawling anxiety was not fun.
Right. And so the year of therapies began, and
yeah, that set me kind of on the journey starting in March 2023 of
psychedelics.
Yeah, that's psychedelics first entered the picture in August of 2023. I saw a professional, and he pointed me in the direction of a group of people who really, really like truly saved my life. I met some folks, and they helped facilitate MDMA treatment for me, and that was when I did MDMA treatment. That was in August of 2023. So I am very, very passionate about hunting. I have one of my best friends and main hunting partners. We drew deer tags. That was on August 10th. So we hiked in and into this spot that we really love. It's a pretty nasty hike in, and this was August 10th on the opener.
You did MDMA in the mountains?
No, MDMA came after this.
Okay.
So this was August 10th, and I found a really good buck, and I had my bow. I was closing in on this deer, and I was like 100 yards away. And this is supposed to be a moment where you're super focused on this one task, and all my brain was showing me when I'm like crawling through the dirt waiting for an opportunity to move on this deer, and all my brain was showing me was my body in a casket,
Wow.
a bullet hole in my head, and my mother weeping over me. And I stood up and I walked back to my pack, and I waited for my buddy he was out hunting another deer, and he came back, and he actually he was there the night that I attempted suicide. He's a firefighter, came off shift, drove down and met me at my room, and he is not an emotional dude at all. And he was getting married, and I was supposed to be in his wedding, and he was like, "Dude, I need you." And so he's like, "I need you there at the wedding."
That was when he found you trying to commit suicide?
That was after that night that my whole family showed up, and
Wow.
My best friend, and then we kind of, that was back in March. And so seeing him be emotional, that was pretty, I guess, profound, because that's not a thing that happens. And
Men don't get emotional?
No. We're really bad at showing it. We definitely still feel it, but we're really bad at showing it. So back in August, on the deer hunt, I waited for him to get back, and I was like, I have to go home, because the mountains for me had always been my reprieve from all the bullshit. It actually made everything worse.
Wow.
Because I was in the place where I was supposed to feel safe, and so it actually exponentiated all those feelings, because I felt like I couldn't run. There was no escape. So we go back, and that's when we drove 6 hours home, went to my neurologist. I don't even know if I showered, and I walked into his office, and I said, "I need help now." And he made some phone calls, and then that was on August 10th, and then August 17th is when I did MDMA. I remember calling the guy who was setting it up, and he said, or I asked him, I said, "Hey, I know this is coming up. My best friend drew a really good elk tag in Nevada, and we were going out." And I said, I was scared to go back out because I didn't want to feel that again, that sense of being trapped. And so I said, "I don't give a fuck if you lie to me right now. I just need you to tell me that this is going to work and I'm going to be okay. Do not care if you lie. I don't even care. I just, for the next 3 days, I need to feel hope." And
Tell me it'll work.
yeah, exactly. Tell me it'll work. And I did it, and never done drugs. I didn't touch alcohol until I was 24, 25. And when I did MDMA, that was the first time in my life where I ever felt compassion for myself. I ever felt love for myself. And that was really, really profound for me. And it showed me that was possible. It showed my brain that, hey, this is what that is. We can get back to there. And I ended up going about 13 months without a suicidal thought. But it helped show me that there was an alternative, but it didn't fix the initial problem.
Right.
So.
And I think that's one reason we're talking today too about MDMA, right? And I think the DoD also invested almost $10 million in studies for MDMA for veterans. But things like MDMA, things like ketamine that can be useful.
Right.
Obviously, Ibogaine is the one that actually rewires your brain, right?
Right.
MDMA doesn't necessarily. Ketamine does not necessarily, even though they help dramatically and they're great solutions.
Yeah.
But Ibogaine is the one that actually, and you're the one who used the phrase, it removes the plaque from your brain, right? The fact that it can rewire your brain, almost take away the trauma, but give you that compassion, the love, everything you need to feel for yourself. What it does to the brain is something no other psychedelic can do, no other medicine on the planet can do, which is why we're talking today about Ibogaine, right?
Yeah.
And what it can really do for people. I think it was funny when I was thinking about Ibogaine and knew I wanted to do it, but Brian Hubbard mentioned it's like having the flu times 10, right? And in my head, I'm like, I can feel like shit for a day. Like, it's worth it. I can do it.
Yeah.
And I remembered I got food poisoning, as did most of Texas, back in January. And that was way worse than Ibogaine and any pain I got from Ibogaine. So it was like, in my experience, I tripped for 2 hours. You'll tell your story next on how long you tripped for. And I had a really bad headache, but there wasn't it wasn't horrible, right?
Yeah.
And even if it were, right, even if I did feel like I was being burned alive for 6 hours, it would be so worth it to be where I am now and have the energy levels I have the presence that I have the patience that I have, which is something I typically never do. Yeah. So tell us about, I know you went to Mexico to do Ibogaine, but what was that whole experience like for you? How long did you trip for? What were your visions like? I know, you were lucky enough, because I think it's awesome if you can talk to something and it talks back, whether that be God or anything else. And the spiritual encounter you had during the treatment, talk us through that.
So I went down with, there's a nonprofit wing of the facility we went to called Beond Service, and we do 4 weeks of prep ahead of time, the veterans, that program. So I kind of had an understanding of what I wanted to work through, and then during the Ibogaine, the first 6 to 9 hours, it felt like I was being burned alive.
And explain that, because it wasn't pain, right?
It wasn't physical pain. There was.
Although I did think that for a solid week before I did Ibogaine.
I should have clarified that. Yeah, it was. I felt like I was inside of fire, like standing, and it felt like I was inside of like when a rocket takes off and all the flames come out. I felt like I was standing inside of that. And then there was terror and anxiety in on a cellular level of my body.
God. For 6 hours.
And caveat, not everyone's experience is like this.
Right.
So experience.
Mine was a circus. It's all different.
Yeah, and like someone like my dad, who experienced, if you were to put it on paper, infinitely more trauma than I did. His experience was amazing and peaceful, and there's
and
a
he laughed the whole time.
Yeah, it was awesome. I got a text from one of the facilitators down there. He said, "Your dad's the happiest person we've ever seen 7.5 hours into an Ibogaine trip," which was very relieving to hear. So for anyone listening, don't think that you're going to hear someone's experience and then say, "Oh, that's what Ibogaine's like," because experiences greatly vary.
Well, and even having one as, I want to say, brutal as yours for those 6 hours, you would do it 100 times again.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a expression among that community that the medicine gives you what you need. In my experience and what I've seen as a participant, as a facilitator, I've probably seen 50 to 60 people go through it. It truly does give you what you need, I believe. So what I take from my Ibogaine trip was two very distinct chapters. And the first part was, being burned alive. And I think that when I reflect on it, I think that a part of me was in denial about what I was experiencing. Like, oh, hey, I know that you try to kill yourself, but no, you're good. I know that you're struggling to sleep or all this stuff, but I'm fine. I'll go do a workout and call it good. I think there was an element of denial or like, I can do this myself. Like, I will figure this out. And it was like the most humbling feeling to just see myself like literally being burned alive, and to just feel helpless. And yeah, it was terrifying. It was challenging. I didn't want to feel like that, but it was like, okay, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna feel all these things because you need to feel.
Did you almost punish yourself? Because I know a big thing with Ibogaine and why I did it, and didn't do any other psychedelics prior, is you can lift your blindfold off and kind of,
Oh yeah,
you can stop that pain, right? Did you ever take your blinders off and stop it for a minute, or did you say, I'm going to be punished. I'm going to be burned for 6 hours.
Yeah, no, I just
Stuck
sat
with
with it. But when I did take my blindfold, the auditory hallucinations were really interesting. I felt like I was inside of like an arena, and everyone, like Metallica was just playing, and like there were like not yelling or screaming, but just like talking and noises and chatter. And I thought when I was in it that all the nursing staff was like talking, and so I started to say shut the and I took my blindfold off, and then I do like the little peep. I'm looking around and there's no one there. The little nurse at the nursing staff looks up and she goes, "Aren't you okay?" Like, yeah, I'm good. And then I go back into it and just chaos.
We both had that. With
I think that's
people surrounding us.
I think that's super common. So yeah, no, the guidance we got in the prep before was like, keep your mask down and stay in the fight. That's how it was framed to us. So that was the first phase. The second phase was very interactive. So it was like, first phase done. Second phase, these little entities, these little beings, or that looked like beans, popped up. And one of my intentions going down there was reestablish that connection with like that kid inside of me, like the joy that I had when I was a kid, that innocence, like reestablish the connection with that, like develop that relationship. Who is that kid? Like, where did I lose the kid? Because if nothing bad ever happened to us, we would still, that kid inside of us would still be the same person. Something had to show us that that's not okay. Someone had to like teach us, or something had to teach us that like that's not okay. So I wanted to reconnect with who that kid was. And when they showed up, they were like, "Hey man, how's it going?" And I was like, "I'm good, guys. How are you?" And they're like, "Oh, we're doing great. We're here to help you out any way we can. And we're here to answer any questions you have." And I was like, "Perfect. I have a list on this legal pad of 15 existential questions I've been dealing with." And they're like, "Oh yeah, easy. We'll help you out." I was like, "Okay, cool." Very friendly, very jovial, very kind. The first question I had was, "What's my purpose?" So I look at it, okay, what is my purpose? And then mask back down. And then I'm like straight back into like,
Wow.
just like this.
That's
just
amazing.
like this. And so I said, "What's my purpose?" And like, "Oh, easy." And a green chalkboard appeared. And as soon as they like flipped it around, and then as soon as it flipped around, they like went like this, and then like confetti popped out everywhere, and like the horns go off like at birthday parties, and it said mentor across it. So
Amazing.
So I was like, "Okay, my purpose is a mentor," and they're like, "Yeah, man, yeah, for sure." I was like, "Okay, noted." So I take my mask off, write down mentor, and then the second question I had is, "What's the most important thing to know?" And they're like, "Oh, good one." I was like, "Okay." And then this like you're gonna brand a cow, this brand like came over my shoulder and stamped the ground in front of me, and then it burned like you were branding a cow, and then it pulls back and smoke kind of appears, and then it says, this voice, it said, "Know thyself." And I was like, okay. So like develop a deeper understanding of the self and who I actually am, Okay, got it. Write that down. And I just went through all these questions. And then one of the ones I got to was, because a big reason I went down there was for traumatic brain injury. So, and if I refer to TBI, that's what traumatic brain injury stands for.
Right.
So I said, did anything happen to my brain that affected it that I don't know about? And then they look at me and they're like, oh yeah. And I was like, really? And they said, oh yeah. So I said, can you show me? And then they went like, they didn't say anything, but I remember they went like this. They're like, are you sure?
Are you sure you want to see that?
And I was like, yep, show me. And they went, okay. And as soon as they said, okay, the universe exploded. And at the edge of the explosion was this little blue dot. And I was like watching it from above, and almost like God's point of view. And I was looking at the blue dot, and it just looked like life amongst destruction. And I said, am I the blue dot? And they went, yeah. And I was like, really? I'm like, what? I'm like going through my memory bank of like, what explosion? Like, what is this metaphor? And it made me think of when my appendix ruptured. I was 3. And I said, is that when that happened, when my appendix ruptured? And they went, yep. And I said, interesting. Okay. And I was like, what's the connection there? Like, what does that have to do with my brain? And then they kind of took me through this. They took me through all these memories of me. I was looking at myself from a third party, but when I was 3, and I was sitting there, little 3-year-old Gehrig was sitting there, tubes coming out of him, and I had the old, I think it was a Nintendo 64, and I would play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and one of my grandpa's coworkers at the time bought me Mulan, the old Disney movie. So I'd sit there in the hospital bed, watch Mulan, play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I remember I was like feeling all the same feelings that I had when I was 3, sitting in that hospital bed. And there was a window outside, and I remember all I wanted to do was go outside and play. And I'm like hooked up to all these monitors. I can't freaking go anywhere. And what I took away from that was not that directly impacted my brain health, but with all the stress. From what I gather, I probably shouldn't have survived that. I don't know if I would go so far to say a miracle, but it wasn't there. It's kind of what it sounds like, though. Like, I probably shouldn't be here right now. And so, like, the stress, all the drugs, all the recovery, during that developmental phase, kind of the intuitive side of me is saying, when I went through all that, something happened to my brain. And when I got these traumatic brain injuries, it because I didn't get blown up. They're super underwhelming stories, but it exacerbated the effects of the TBIs and really exponentiated the damage and the chaos that I experienced later in life. So it basically kind of primed me for destruction. That was pretty incredible. When I realized that, this is going back in Ibogaine, they like turned me and like grabbed me, and then we went inside of my brain, and I saw these like 2 tubes, and then there was tubes, and they widened out at the end, and then there was a space between them, and they were kind of up in the air, and so they almost looked like mushrooms that were cut off right at the tip, and then but there was, like I said, there was a space between them, and then one of them wilted away and died like a flower. And then the Ibogaine, these beings, took a new one and like slammed it in where the old one was, and then pushed like this, and then all these dots started like going back and forth between these things. I was telling my friend this story. Her name's Kate Pate. She's a PhD neurophysiologist who specializes in TBI. And I was explaining this to her, and she said, "I want you to go Google this." I think it was what a synapse looks like, the neural connections in your brain. And she's like, "I want you to go Google this." And what she told me to Google was exactly what I saw on and I don't have like a neurology background. I've never done like there was no previous knowledge that would kind of bias that what I saw. It was like a Twilight Zone moment when I was looking on my phone. This was weeks later, looking on my phone, seeing what I saw in Ibogaine, and saw that damaged, that neuron, whatever that was. I saw that literally being repaired. So that was pretty cool. And I've definitely noticed an uptick in brain connectivity since Ibogaine. So
yeah. I think it stands out for me, and I know a lot of people have this journey, but when they have memories that go back to their past, whether a good memory or a bad memory, but reliving that memory, that's why I think Ibogaine is really cool for people who have lost people, because they relive so many good and great memories with that loved one. And that's what you did. You relived when you were 3. A lot of people have a life review, they call it, right? Yeah. But life review, talking to the medicine, seeing it work inside your brain. I felt like it was rewiring my brain in my little 2-hour trip that I had, which I thought was awesome. But yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, the life review thing is super interesting. I know some people who it's like they went through every single thing. Like, that was my dad. My dad had to do that. I can go hit on that later.
Get into it. Tell us about it.
So he basically, what he was going back to his childhood, what he was taught, what he was shown was that, again, the fear, be ready. Like there's always an impending sense of doom or threat. And so how I think about it, like growing up with him, what I've seen is that like not only was that instilled in him that fear, but then the backside of that, like what came of it was this front that he would put up. And in some ways it wasn't a front, because like when he would tell me like I will fight anyone, like I truly believe that. Even like he's the kind of guy who he's so tough, it's to a detriment. He thought about tough physically, but some of the things I posed to him was like doing the hard thing doesn't necessarily mean physically suffering. It can be sitting there silent for 5 minutes with your thoughts. That to him was like Armageddon.
Challenging.
Exactly, yes, because then you had to sit with everything that was going on here. So with his struggles with alcohol and addiction in general, the way I mean, I'm sure some PhD can explain it more clear, but the way I see addiction is like it's someone's got to run to something else because they're not okay with what's inside. Mm-hmm. And that's what alcohol was for him. Like when I would see positive emotion from my dad, it was following or during a story where he beat the shit out of someone in a fight. And it like, you know, yeah, there was laughs at the family dinner table, but like outside of that, when I saw emotion, or like when he would tell a story, like, you know, dads talking with their kids, whenever there'd be a story, it was always surrounding violence. Nothing else. Nothing else. When he did this life review, he was going through like there were all these files laid out, like almost like he was at a computer, like looking at a desktop, and there are all these files. And so he would have to like relive this when he remembered the person he fought and where he was at. Then a green check mark would appear next to that person, and he had to do that for every single one. And he said there were like hundreds. And then his dad came up, and again, my grandpa was an old, angry, drunk Irish guy, and his dad came up. And he was like, nope, not ready for that. And so he skipped him. And then he had to go back through all these people, so they're green check marks, and then he had to go do his dad. And when he got through everyone, the Ibogaine, there was like a cursor that came up, and it went over to the trash file and clicked delete. And then as soon as all that was deleted, he said he just felt this weight come out of him. And he was kind of set free from that. So yeah, his Ibogaine experience was opposite of mine. It was still challenging, but there was no burning alive. There was just that life review.
I think there were several folks that did Ibogaine with us that had some type of filing cabinet that popped up. Several stories of this filing cabinet that they had to go through, and almost the same thing, like take it to the trash. So it's so interesting that there's life reviews, there's speaking to the medicine. I know for Kenny and Kenny was addicted to marijuana. We both didn't have any, there was no speaking back and forth with the medicine, but we both had a ton of questions. And I remember he did it before me, and he said, I didn't talk to the medicine. None of my questions were answered, but that night, all of my questions had been answered.
Yeah.
And it was the exact same for me. I didn't have a conversation necessarily, but that night, I'm looking at all the questions I wrote down, and I'm like, I have that answer now. It's like it's fulfilled in your system, if you will. But going back to yours, because I know we're going to talk through some of the guys, and I want to know more of what you're doing now. But the one that hit me the most when you and I were talking was the last question you asked to the medicine. So share that with us.
Yeah. We kind of got through everything, and then all the questions I had, and then they said, "Is there anything else you want to know or see?" And so I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, what do I want to see? And I said, I want you to show me the crucifixion of Christ. And they went, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yep." And so as soon as I said yes, I shot down into the crowd
From space.
from space, wherever the hell I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I shot down in the crowd, and it was just like loud and chaos. And I remember looking up, and as real as this feels, as sure as I am that there's cameras in the room and we're talking, and like there's no doubt in my mind that this is reality. That's how real this felt. I looked up at the cross and Christ on it, and I see the Roman soldier put the spear through him. And as soon as that happened, he like lifted his head up and let out this roar. And it felt like I was inside the vocal cords of a lion on the Serengeti, with like how loud that was. And when he did that, we like zoomed back like into space, and I was looking at Earth, and then there was this blue translucent sphere starts to like go over the Earth. And then on top of Earth there were like these two flames. One was a tall blue flame, and then the other was a tall, slightly less tall orange flame. And as a Christian, I took that as like, there is dominion over Earth. That's like, and it's not me. And so that really helps with my sense of relinquishing control, or the ability to relinquish control, and not feel like I have to have all the answers for everything.
Yeah, and I think with Ibogaine, it's kind of why we're here today, to make sure everyone knows the power of it, knows what it can do. I think, and I want to get to where you're at now, because like you said, the number one question you ask the medicine is, what is my purpose?
Right.
Your purpose is to be a mentor. And without me even knowing that was one of the conversations you and I had in Mexico, where I said, this is what you were meant to do, right? When Gehrig was there, he was coaching. Was it 5 guys that came?
Yeah, 5.
Five other veterans that came. And I mean, these weren't little bitty veterans. These were big, burly. They walk in the room. They have a sense of presence. You feel them. You felt all of you guys when you walked in the room. So knowing you were facilitating them and staying up for 5 days straight to be with them. And I think, and I know we'll talk about the guys, but even with Sean, Sean and I sat down at dinner, and this was after he had done Ibogaine. And most personal, loving guy, right?
Yeah.
And I said, what did Ibogaine do for you? And he just looked at me dead in the eyes, and he said, Ibogaine saved my life.
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of clicked for me after Ibogaine is, even if our message can save one life, and what you're doing as a facilitator for others can save one life, it is so worth it. So talk about where you're at now, because you only did Ibogaine in February. I did mine in April, and you have facilitated, I think you said 50 to 60 guys that have
That's
gone through it.
that's how many people I've seen go through the facility. So I just did the one group. I helped a buddy. He's a friend now. His name's John Stevens. He was the lead, and then my role down there was just basically support these guys, and it was.
Was that an immediate thing you wanted to do post Ibogaine? Like, was it that I'm going to mentor these guys, let's jump into it? Or what happened when you got home from Ibogaine that?
So we did we did the 4 weeks after
The integration coaching.
Right. So yeah, the whole side of the whole program for the Beond service is you do 4 weeks prep, the week on site, and then 4 weeks after. So it's a 9-week program. So we did our 4 weeks post, and then sometime after probably a couple weeks following the 4 weeks, one of the guys who started the program, he asked me if I would be interested in coming down and helping facilitate. So I didn't seek it out. They asked me if I'd be interested, and I said absolutely. I was in a incredibly healthy space. I felt like it was a great honor.
You knew your purpose.
Definitely, yeah. It was pretty obvious, and then it was also cool having talking to people like you, and you're like, you are meant to do this, and I was like, I kind of feel like I am, so it's cool to have like that, I guess, validation. But yeah, so they asked me to come down. We did our 4 weeks of prep with the guys, and then we did our week on site in April, and it was, like I said, I know my experience. I know the group of guys that I went through with. I know how much it affected them, seeing all the people, because there's people just going through always at different stages. So when I went down there as a facilitator, I was able to see, witness the healing from, and not going through my own stuff at the time, having been in a better spot, and able to witness it from knowing how much these guys were struggling and the depths of what they were struggling with, and to be able to witness their transformation and the reclamation of their soul. So Tyler this was a very interesting experience for me, because Tyler had profound back pain, and he had surgeries, multiple combat deployments to Iraq, and kind of going through a lot in a couple different aspects: physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain. And what we learned was a lot of his pain was stemming from fear. And he had a pretty traumatic experience as a child, losing his father. And that experience really shaped that lens in which he sees the world. And fear for him was something to be avoided. And it inhibited any potential growth, because once that thought pattern came up of fear, it was shut down mode, time now. So it would basically cripple him with pain. I saw it myself. He was in immense physical pain, but it was all psychosomatic. It was all stemming from an emotion. So he had a very challenging, beautiful and challenging Ibogaine experience. His thought of him being alone was not something he was comfortable with. Me and one of the other facilitators stuck by him during his trip, and he was challenged. He expressed feeling like he was chained to a table, seeing loved ones and not being able to reach out to them. It was absolutely challenging, and what he learned was that he was able to confront that fear and get through it. And the result of that, of him having the courage, because you can't have courage without having fear first. If you're not scared of something, then you can't have courage as a byproduct. You have to have that as prerequisite. So once he faced that and made that growth within himself, his back pain subsided. He went from over a decade of 9 out of 10 chronic severe pain to now he's reporting 2 months of zero pain, 0 out of 10 pain. So that was
unheard of.
Yeah, absolutely. And just beautiful to witness, and so happy for him. That was Tyler's experience. And then we have Sean. Sean kind of stole the show. When he showed up in the 4 sessions prior to Ibogaine, Sean, there was a lot of disarray, disorganization mentally, a very, very shut down person. And he has kind of been a recluse for a decade. And all this guy liked doing was working on cars, and he was very, very shut down. And then after Ibogaine, all of a sudden Sean goes from being the Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest into he's this beautiful human, full of energy, full of life, speaking more clearly. Yeah, it was absolutely awesome and a privilege to witness. So his journey was, like other people, there was ups and downs, but his willingness to face the unknown and to challenge thought patterns it paid off. And Sean is on his path to becoming the person that he's meant to be. And,
knowing Sean, I think it's funny because he's the person I would assume would walk up to a stranger and have a conversation. Just
exactly
that friendly, that smile, that I want to get to know you, I want to have that conversation, bubbly guy.
Yeah. And he's a big dude, and he can be imposing, and now he's just this big teddy bear. And before that, that was not an option.
There was almost, I think you told me on one of our calls, like there was almost no one behind the camera.
No. Yeah,
he wasn't even there.
He was not who he was pre-Ibogaine is not who he was meant to be or who he was prior to all the trauma. So yeah, to see that absence of almost a soul behind that lens and the torment, to see him be absolved of that and to see him living out the life that he's meant to be is still so cool.
And remind me, because he has a ton of kids.
Yeah.
Like
Sean's fertile.
7 or 8 children.
Yeah.
And I think about that. But, Sean is one of the big reasons that it clicked for me on, when he told me and looked me in my eyes and said, Ibogaine saved my life. Like, this is something that if it can save one other person's life, hell yeah. Like, let's go save lives.
And people like Sean and people like my dad who seeing the growth that they can have in a week, that's encouraging. Like, no one's too lost. Mm-hmm. If you're willing to put in the work, you're not a lost cause. But you have to hold up your end of the bargain. This hasn't been a success story for everyone. And in my experience, what I've garnered from it is that if you don't hold up your end of the bargain, it's not gonna fix you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Sean put in the work and Sean got what he wanted.
I think you bring up a really good point on Ibogaine is, even though it's the easy button, in my opinion, it's not the magic button, right? You have to do work afterwards, right? You have to change your past. So whether you're starting yoga or meditation or integration coaching with other people, but you have to continue practicing and building this new healthy routine, and even the self-awareness, right? Practicing, like catching yourself doing it. It is not you take Ibogaine and you are healed for the rest of your life and everything is fine and dandy. It takes work, right? And people that go back, and we know one individual that went back to their complete ways, and Ibogaine did not work for that individual. You have to work on it. That's why integration coaching is so critical. That's why I believe having a great integration coach and someone you mesh with, that's why you are meant to do this. You're a tremendous coach. It's critical for individuals going through Ibogaine, because when you're done, you're alone, right? And if you're not taking the steps to continue to rebuild yourself, then you can fail.
Yeah. Yeah, that you have to set yourself up for success on the backside. I mean, it's just like anything else. It's like you can't go get your degree and then be like, I'm an expert in the field. It's like, no, you have to continue to like hone your craft and then implement. You have like everything you're going to learn from it, and you have to apply it. Like you have to take those things and then integrate them into your life. Otherwise, they're just a good idea. So yeah, the integration is absolutely crucial. The one of the beautiful things about Ibogaine is the window that you have where your brain's essentially a clean slate for a certain amount of time, depending on how fast you metabolize it. But you have a clean slate to build off of and build all these new habits. So that's the beautiful thing of psychedelics and especially Ibogaine, is how powerful that clean slate is. And then you can actually take like, okay, I'm going to practice being more emotionally vulnerable with my wife. I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to start playing the guitar. Whatever it is, you have the ability to do that. So yeah, and then the integration is like, you're right. It's not a magic pill. It's not, it's a powerful pill. But it's not going to do the work for you. Nothing in life is going to do the work for you. Yeah. So it is a powerful accelerant to get you to where you want to be. I would say definitely the most powerful accelerant, but it just gets you to where you need to be as fast as possible.
And now I know we're going to talk about two other individuals, but let's go over Weston, right? Yeah. And Gehrig and I talked to Weston about sharing his story, but Weston was there for our entire journey, right? He was there the longest. He had been addicted to drugs for well over 20 years. When I got there, I would have assumed he already did Ibogaine. He was the life of the party. He was the first guy at the cold plunge. He always beat anyone's record in the cold plunge. But he also, every new person that came in, especially the guys, right, just the encouragement he gave them, like, get in the water, you can do that. He would stay there the whole time. And almost holding hands with everyone through the journey, even though he had not done Ibogaine yet. But he had done, opioids. I know he had, he almost died, I believe, from opioids this past August. And then he was put on Suboxone, which is the worst drug, in my opinion, that any doctor can prescribe anyone because of its addictive qualities, the withdrawal you go through. That's why he spent such a long time in Mexico, is because he wanted to get off Suboxone there, right, and not have a risk of going back. He was going to change his life, primarily, in my opinion, for his wife. And I think my favorite story with Weston is, he said he didn't communicate with his wife, right? They didn't have a relationship. And I remember him coming to just came and sat on the couch one day, and he was crying, and he said, I just had a 2-hour FaceTime with my wife. And it was the best conversation. It was like we were in high school. And that actually happened to a couple males when I was there in Mexico. And just the conversations they had. And I know Weston's doing well now, but tell us a little bit more. I know you've talked to him recently about how he's doing.
Yeah, caught up with him a couple times. He actually sent me a song that he made his wife, which was pretty beautiful. Weston's got his own beautiful way of communicating love. And that was super powerful to see. Like you said, his healing before. He's doing absolutely phenomenal, and because, like we said, is like he laid the groundwork while he was there ahead of time, and then he did the necessary things on the backside to put himself in that position to succeed. He's, as far as I'm aware, he got a much better relationship with his wife, his kids. And he's like, there's just a life in his voice that is it gives me peace knowing how much peace he's feeling. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. So I was very, very proud of Weston, all the work he's done. I mean, he worked his ass off.
Oh, so. I think one difference of the place you and I went to in Mexico is the community aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because Ibogaine can be done many different ways. It needs to be done safely. It needs to be done under a doctor's supervision. In my opinion, it needs to be done with plenty of integration coaching, both pre and post Ibogaine. But the people who go and I know there's one clinic that you go and you do it the night you get there, right? Yeah. And then I think you were there 4 or 5 days, right? It's very quick. You might do some coaching sessions before, but what helped Weston, what helped Tim, all of the guys, the veterans there, was that sense of community, right? It was the discussions around the pool. I call it an adult summer camp, right? We were at the pool, we were at dinner, we were doing yoga to get together. Like, we were having a great time every day, just enjoying the conversations. And I think it's Mel Robbins, she leads one of the biggest podcasts that talks about what COVID did to people, right? When it took that sense of community away. Oh, yeah. And a lot of people have not rebuilt that sense of community. And that's what's beautiful about Beond in Mexico, just that community aspect. And really, I mean, you and I talked to several of the individuals that we were there with. My doctor, who did it before me and encouraged me, said, it's kind of like doing 4 years of therapy at one time. And I thought about it, and I'm like, those sessions we had, everyone was strangers, so no one was scared to share their darkest secrets, if you will. Yeah. So it was easy. Every single day we were having, whether it was a fire ceremony or an integration session there, you're sharing what you're going through or what your trauma was, and then you're hearing people that have been through similar or been through way worse. And then you hear them on the other side of Ibogaine and how they're doing, and it's amazing. And I think that's a huge part of success with Ibogaine, is doing it in that type of community. I know our next topic is your dad, right? And I know, you've touched on it quite a bit, on your relationship with your dad and where it was. And I think the longing maybe that you've had for that relationship with your dad. And Joe just completed Ibogaine, I think 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago.
So walk us through that. How was that relationship? I know at 15 is when your first trauma, I would say, really appeared, from your dad drinking. And then where are you at today?
Yeah, to really paint the picture, I mean, I had basically resigned off on ever having a relationship with him. I had already grieved kind of the death of that relationship. That was really tough. Like, literally feeling like he was already dead and having worked through it.
How old were you when that happened?
I actually came up when I was doing ketamine treatment in 2023.
Okay.
So I was 28. Yeah, I'd fully accepted that nothing was ever gonna fix him. He was never gonna fix himself, and that hope is a word that gets you hurt. And that's another thing that kind of, that hope, having like, fuck, maybe this will work, and like desperation, like living in a state of desperation, pleading, like praying to God. Like, I understand very, very much so how it feels to feel like your prayers aren't answered, or whatever, however you're gonna phrase it, or like you've been maybe not rejected, but something like that. So yeah, there was no indication that he was going to change. When I was down at Beond, I said, I called my mom on Wednesday. I said, I don't give a shit what you have to do. Sell, or straight off your retirement, sell the motorhomes, do whatever you have to do to get him down here. Because.
And that was after you completed your.
Yeah, that was 2 days after the flood. Okay. So he's still down there. So that was on a Wednesday. And
that's exactly what he did.
Yeah. He did what he could. He was basically in survival mode until he got down there. And he went down 7 days sober, which was a huge deal for him. And when he was down there, he did the work necessary. And like I said earlier, I got a text from Clay, and he said, Clay runs the Beond service, and he said, because we had some other veterans and first responders down there, he said, your dad's the happiest person I've ever seen, 7.5 hours into an Ibogaine trip. And that was awesome, but also I started feeling hope again, because when he went down there was still like, my ego was still like, this is not going, protect yourself.
Right.
Hope is something that should be feared. And he was crushing it. We talked on the phone, or he just texted me a couple days after when they got their phones back, and just in capital letters, wow. And I was like, yeah, been there. So I knew it was working. He wanted it, even though he didn't have the tools prior to going down there to get through what he was going through. He had the effort and the will, and that, I would say, is the two most important things, because you're gonna pick up tricks along, like, whatever modality kind of helps you a lot, whether it's breathwork, meditation, exercise, yoga, whatever that thing is. You're gonna find that thing that really fits with you. And for him to now have meditation as a tool, and the kind of the experiences he's having on meditation, I would have never guessed that.
What was your first conversation like with your dad when he got back?
When he got back, it was, I knew it worked instantly. As soon as I saw him, I knew it worked, because having seen 10 veterans, and then, like I said, probably another 40 to 50 people go through on the other side. I've seen it work, and I know when it works. And I could literally, I saw his face, and I was like, yeah, we're good. We're good here. 55 years of trauma gone in a week. So
Crazy.
yeah. And I mean, yeah, you throw in other addictions in there too. I mean, it's so effective with addiction, because it gets to the root cause and then helps you restructure the relationship with whatever it is that's plaguing the individual. So, like I said, it's a perspective shift, and that's what he got out of it. So it was really beautiful and relieving. It was one of my friends texted me and said, how is it having your dad back? And I said, well, what's the word for finding, or for having
Something you never had.
well, not only something I never had, but the thing I wanted most, and having it right in front of your eyes, seeing it die in front of you, literally dying in front of you. You can't have it, and then all of a sudden you do. So I'm like, whatever the word for that is, that's how I feel. I think the word is indescribable. Yeah. The physical toll of being tormented by trauma is, it's hell. It's hell on earth. So to see him be free of that is, well, and also you can see the weight it's taken off my family, because we've been carrying his shit around too. And I've seen it change my sister. I've seen changes in my family to where it's not just him. Like, your stuff doesn't just end with you. And a lot of people, if anyone's listening to this and they think that, like, they're protecting their family or their loved ones from their stuff by not talking about it, I can promise you that people are going to hear you out, and they're
feeling it. They feel that energy.
If you never talk about it, then the only thing they're left with, they're still dealing with your addiction, with your anger outburst, with your XYZ. They're still dealing with it. They just have no fucking concept of where you're coming. They have no perspective, and so they're just left to assume. Like when I was younger, I thought that my dad liked drinking beer more than he loved me. Obviously, I was a 16-year-old kid, so I was very naive. But that's the narrative that I lived with for years. And I think a lot of people, when they're living with someone who's addicted, who is an addict, that your mind wants an answer, and so they're gonna find an answer. And if they have no perspective of where you're coming from, when my dad started to open up to me, that's when I started to have compassion for him and understand, like, damn, dude, you went through a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. But before that, the only thing that my brain could come up with was he likes drinking beer more than
Our brains create stories.
Yeah.
And that's the story we start believing.
whatever, that unknown, that's a scary place to be in. That's a super scary place to be in, because you're like, do I go left? Do I go right? There's an answer. Even if it's the wrong answer, it's something. It's something to hang on to. So yeah, it starts with, and like men like to think that, like I said, hard work comes from physical stuff. No, dude. Be emotionally vulnerable with your family. Like, and when that physical sensation arises of anxiety or whatever that thing, that sentence that your mind tells you, here's why you shouldn't do this. This is unsafe, blah, blah, blah. That's the hard work. That's the challenge. That's going to be the most worthy. I don't give a shit how many hours you work a week. I don't care how blue collar you are. I don't give a shit how many people you've gotten rid of in combat. I don't care. It's like, are you willing to show up for yourself and your loved ones?
And you have to show them how to be vulnerable too. They learn it from you.
Yeah, you gotta, like, you have to lead by example. Yeah. Do the hard thing. Like, if the hard thing is being emotionally vulnerable with your loved ones, do that thing.
Just encouraging the audience out there, like, really looking into it for your loved ones that need the help, right? If you know someone that's been through trauma, it's something that can help. My doctor, I love how he said it's 4 years of therapy at once.
Oh, yeah.
And actually Brian Hubbard says it too about opioid addicts. It takes like 18 months for their brains to be rewired. And the current methods in the U.S. are at a 7% success rate, when Ibogaine, I think, is in the 80s or 90s for success rates against opioids. And that's in 48 hours. So we can do 18 months of opioid addicts struggling, possibly relapsing. And just, I mean, for opioid addicts, I know it's stressful, right? Coming off of it, you live a life of anxiety. You have sleep problems. You have relationship problems. Everything you go through in those 18 months, if you even get it to 18 months, can be also solved in 48 hours with Ibogaine. So I think that's amazing. I also think other things you talked about, I know MDMA is currently illegal as well. Ketamine's not, right? Ketamine is available where you can go do clinics, and I know you and I have discussed doing it at an IV clinic, right? There's several ways you can get it, but doing it, again, under that doctor's supervision, under safety protocols. But ketamine is something that is now shown to help anxiety, depression, PTSD. It's not an expensive route to go, but it's somewhere to start, right? And somewhere to start rewiring your brain, and then building a community, doing things that can help change your lifestyle. But of course, Ibogaine is the reason you and I are here. And I know I was thinking for our audience, right? Brian Hubbard is leading the Ibogaine initiative in America. He's now the CEO of AmericansForIbogaine.org. So that is my reference for the audience listening today on where they can go find information. You can donate there. I know, again, Ibogaine's expensive. Not everyone can afford it. It is something that you need to be able to say, I'm going to do it. I'll do whatever it takes. I will get off the alcoholics, right? I have to stop the alcohol. I have to stop depression medication. There's a lot of substances you cannot be using in order to do Ibogaine, right? And you have to be clean for so many days, right? Suboxone, I believe, is 28 days. Other things are 7 days, 10 days. You have to be willing to have a few tough days for a really amazing reality at the end of Ibogaine.
And also, it's doable. Like, there's plenty of evidence to, I've never dealt with addiction withdrawal. I've seen it. It looks like hell. But I guess I would just encourage people that are interested in doing it, that it is doable, and everything that you want is on the other side of a lot of struggle and hard work, and it's doable. And I would implore you to find that why, and then get after it.
And Gehrig, I know you mentioned it, but the nonprofit you're working with is called Beond Service.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the nonprofit side of things. It's a really cool program started by Clay Smith, former Army, Purple Heart recipient. So he started this. And it's been I was actually the second group of guys to go down. So the Beond Service is doing absolutely beautiful things. It's it's no cost to the veteran or first responder, and then the spouse is actually eligible to go through the program as well. So in total, it's a 9-week program. So you do 4 weeks of prep. You're going to meet with the 2 facilitators, so the lead facilitator and the co-facilitator. And then you're also going to get 2 coaching sessions ahead of time. And then you do your week at Beond. And then you go and do your 4 weeks post. You have 2 more coaching sessions and then the 4 follow-up calls. So in total, it's a 9-week program. We're still, there's still some development going on, so we're still out of the program. It's what Clay has created has been a truly beautiful thing. So there's donation links on the Beyond Service website, and then that for anyone interested, that program is, literally saving. I've had 2 people tell me that they had heard about how effective Ibogaine was, and they were going to go do it. They knew that it wouldn't work, so then they could go home and kill themselves and then not feel guilty about it. And both of those people are still here. So this work is truly saving people's lives, and it's gonna send waves throughout the country. Like if we can heal five folks a month, and then their families are healed, it's gonna send waves. So this is I think in 15 years this is gonna be hopefully the leading way that we actually treat mental health, not the symptoms of it, not creating more Suboxones or creating all these things that treat a symptom of a cause, and actually get to the root issue of it and help people reclaim their lives and heal their families and do good in the world.
Yeah. I think in one word you've used several times in the session, it gives Americans hope again, right? It really hope for their families, hope for their friends. Honestly, so many people can just use Ibogaine, and needs to be done. So thank you, Gehrig.
Alrighty.